good people? Fortunately for you, you've linked up with a real one again, and that's me, your brother, the amazing self-becoming Jay, broadcasting to you from the deep, dark, undisclosed digital dugout known as a Black King's perspective, where we review news, trends, and current events from a 100% African fundamentalist, Pan-African black male perspective. It's good to be with y'all again. And apparently, we got some unfinished business left to get to. This is the second part of an earlier video that I had to cut short, so we're gonna just jump right into the conversation where we left off. So if you want more details about how America's involvement in Iran is already a quagmire, and how white social anxiety is fueling white racism and neo-imperialism, check out the first video. And now, without further ado, now, while I know it might not feel like it for those listening and watching from the United States, however, between the years 1991 and 2025, the American economy, by all official measures, has performed consistently well, even with all its ups and downs. During this time, the United States economy experienced two of the longest periods of growth in its history: an explosion in the valuation of assets and stocks.
Well, the Dow Jones jumped 11.4% last night, and there have only been 4 better days in history.
And the GDP that went from around $6 trillion in 1991 to over $29 trillion in 2024. That's the American economy booming. But all this economic winning...
In fact, we're winning so much that we really don't know what to do about it.
...has seemingly come at a cost for the average American. During that same period, the purchasing power of the dollar has fallen by 140%. Another way to describe the same occurrence is to say that the price of things has risen by 140% since 1991 in the United States of America. During that same time period, American wages have risen only by 25%. The eroding purchasing power of the dollar, inflation, is reflected in things like exploding home prices. And the failure of American wages to keep up with that inflation is reflected by the fact that large and ever-increasing numbers of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Even as the dollar was hemorrhaging value, those families at the top 1% were still able to increase their wealth by over $8 million, while those families at the bottom 20% only did so by $8,500. Now, there are a few explanations for why this has happened. Things like financialization, deregulation, but the cause most pertinent to our conversation here is globalization. In the 1990s, the American business class moved their factories to China. Those companies that participated enjoyed a greater profit margin because the inputs of labor in China were cheaper than they were in the United States. The adverse effect of this, however, is that it hollowed out America's industrial manufacturing capacity, in addition to robbing many of Americans of their jobs, leaving many dead and dying communities in its wake. The same economic incentive that pushed American companies to relocate their factories to China also plays a large role in the acceptance and promotion of mass migration to the United States and other white countries in the Western world. Whereas outsourcing factories allows one to exploit foreign labor markets overseas, mass migration allows one to exploit foreign labor markets domestically. And we could continue this conversation about the exploitative nature of the American economy. For example, something like the financialization of the system, a situation where services and products of financial institutions like banks account for a growing part of economic activity, but do nothing for productivity. We want to keep our conversation focused, however, and our point here is that the renewed American imperialism is a direct result of the American system dealing with the contradiction of having served its greedy business class, allowing it to outsource the country's productive capacity, and wishing to remain the dominant force in geopolitics and the world economy. This explains the Obama administration's pivot toward Asia, Trump's trade war with China, and the Biden administration's continuance of that trade war. It also sheds light on America's adventurism in Latin America and other vulnerable, resource-rich nations. There's a final observation that I would like to make here, however, which I feel like has to be made in order for this channel to be the hard-hitting and insightful thing that we want it to be. And that's the observation that a population like white America that feels vulnerable within its own borders and on the world stage gets a psychological boost from seeing its navies sail against, its warplanes drop bombs on, and its special forces kidnap the leaders of other nations. So, what is the significance of these observations for the Black world community, the Black world, Abibiman? Well, in the case of U.S. actions in Iran, a victory for Iran is a victory for Africa, which, fortunately for Iran, only means being able to withstand the American and Israeli attack. The reason why an Iranian victory in the current conflict would also equal an African victory is because of Iran's small yet growing presence on the continent. Just last year alone, in 2025, Iranian exports to the region increased by 85%. A number which exemplifies the Islamic Republic's attempt to forge deeper diplomatic and economic ties in the region as a workaround American sanctions and attempts to diplomatically isolate the country. Iran's interest in Africa is of strategic importance to the countries on the continent because a partnership with Iran provides those countries with two things that they desperately need: more trade partners and access to modern defense technology. The more nations there are clamoring for a seat at the table to make a deal with the nations of Africa, the more leverage those African nations have over each individual potential trade partner. If any of them gives Africa a bad deal, those African nations could simply look for a better deal with someone else. Another way to express the same phenomena would be that with so many players in the field, it makes it difficult for each individual nation trying to make a deal with Africa to dominate the situation and skew things to their unfair advantage. Another advantage that African countries derive from working with middle powers like Iran, especially if those African countries move as a bloc, is that it allows Africa to strengthen its position on the world stage without simultaneously augmenting the power of already strong nation-states and trading blocs. Apart from Iran's increased diplomatic and economic engagement with the continent, of particular interest is Tehran's increasing military cooperation with African nations, especially its dealings with the Alliance of Sahelian States. The Alliance of Sahelian States, whose initials are AES in French, is a confederation made up of the West African nations of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, and at present is the most anti-Western imperialist, African fundamentalist, Pan-African entity on the continent of Africa. The alliance was brought into existence on September 16, 2023, with the signing of the Liptako-Gurma Charter, after ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, threatened to invade Niger and remove its recently installed military junta, which was the third in the region after Mali and Burkina Faso. The member states of the AES have embarked on aggressive programs of self-development and mutual defense. And it's in the realm of defense that the interests of Bamako, Niamey, and Ouagadougou line up perfectly with those of Tehran, which has engaged the member states of AES in a trade policy which has been described as defense for minerals. And the description seems to be accurate, at least in the case of Niger, where the Ayatollahs have sent drones to President General Titiani's government in exchange for local minerals, as well as having signed several memorandums of understanding with the nation of Burkina Faso, and has even assisted in the training of Burkinabe forces. Even as late as February of this year, the defense minister of Burkina Faso was in Iran for the purpose of talks that would bolster security and defense ties between the two nations. A victory for Iran in this current conflict would not only mean a partner of growing economic and strategic importance would survive, but it would also act as proof of concept for Iran's defensive strategy, with African nations, but especially those of the AES, reaping all the benefits of all the lessons learned by Iranian weapons operators during this conflict, without having had to have a conflict with the West, as defense technology, technique, and know-how is transported from the Islamic Republic to the nations of Africa. So in summary, again, our estimation here at a Black King's perspective is that the American quagmire in Iran is a win for Africa, as it would mean the survival of a partner of increasing economic and strategic importance for the African continent. The rising tide of white racism and the trend toward neo-Western imperialism should obviously have the effect of increasing antagonism and even acts of violence against Black people domestically and internationally. What might not be so obvious, however, is that this societal anxiety, this emotion, this energy can only take one of two paths. It can either reach its goal or reach its limits. Reaching its goal not only means the continued exploitation, domination, and marginalization of Black people politically, culturally, and economically, but it also means those forms of abuse becoming as brazen as they were in times past. What this rising tide of white supremacy and neo-Western imperialism reaching its limit would look like would be it being checked by black power. But we don't get black power without black unity. Unity in thought, unity in understanding, which in turn should lead to unity in action. So that does it more or less for my analysis of the situation in Iran and rising racism and neo-Western imperialism. I greatly appreciate you watching the video and rocking with me all the way to the end. Hey, make sure to do your part, because we're not just making videos for video's sake. It's here to inform you, they're here to inform you, but also to give you the tools and the understanding to help your community move forward. So, do your part and play your position. Study our history, live our culture, link with like mind, and build for black self-sufficiency. Until the next video, race first is the word, you heard me?